cabin was silent except for the rhythmic crackle of firewood snapping in the stone fireplace. Outside, the lake stretched into a sheet of black glass, reflecting the pale glow of the moon. It was one of those rare, peaceful nights where the world seemed to pause. My wife, Emily, had taken the kids upstairs after we'd roasted marshmallows together. Their laughter still lingered faintly in my ears, warm and comforting, like an echo of a life I wanted to protect at all costs. That's when I heard it, a faint thud on the deck. Then another. At first I thought it was a raccoon or maybe a deer nosing around. We'd had our fair share of late-night animal visitors before. But then came the sound that froze my blood. The creak of wood under deliberate, heavy steps. What? Was walking across the deck slowly, confidently, like they had every right to be there. I rose from the leather chair by the fire, setting my book down carefully so the sound wouldn't carry. My instincts screamed that something was off. We were alone out here. The nearest neighbor was a good mile down the dirt road, and nobody came uninvited not this late. I moved quietly toward the front window, heart hammering as I drew back the curtain just a fraction. The sight on the other side made my stomach twist. There she was, Karen, even from a distance. I could recognize her bleach blonde hair under the porch light, that trademark sneer etched into her face. She stood on my deck like she owned it, a half-empty drink in her hand. But she wasn't alone. At least 12 people crowded around her, men and women, some clutching beer bottles, others hauling speakers and coolers as if they were about to throw a full-blown party. They looked young, rowdy, and far too eager. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, listening. This is it. Karen's voice rang out, shrill and commanding. He thinks this lake belongs to him, but tonight we're showing him what happens when you mess with the community. Her so-called army erupted in cheers. One man banged a bottle against the railing. Another cranked up a speaker, blasting distorted music into the still night air. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. It wasn't the first time Karen had targeted me. Ever since I'd bought the cabin, a property that came with deeded lake rights, she'd made it her mission to make my life miserable. She'd shown up at odd hours, demanded I join her unofficial lake association, and even threatened to have me fined for not complying with community standards. But breaking into my home, that was a whole new level of insanity. Behind me, I heard the creak of the stairs. Emily appeared in her robe, her eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" she whispered. I motioned toward the window. She looked, then gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God." "The kids go upstairs," I told her firmly. "Lock the bedroom door. Stay with them. Do not come out until I tell you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She knew better than to argue. She disappeared back up the stairs, her footsteps soft but hurried. I turned back toward the window, fists clenched. Karen and her group were spreading out across the deck, now pounding on the siding, rattling the windows, laughing like hyenas in the dark. One of them shouted, "Open up! We're here for the party." Party? No. This was no party. This was an invasion. I backed away from the window, moving toward the coat rack by the door. From behind my jacket, I pulled out the old wooden baseball bat I kept for emergencies. Its weight was solid and familiar in my hands, grounding me in. The chaos unfolding outside. Beside it, on the console table, sat my heavy-duty flashlight, the kind with a beam so strong it could blind someone in the dark. I took that too. I looked around the living room one last time. The cabin suddenly felt different. The warm, inviting space where my children had been laughing only an hour ago now felt like a battlefield waiting to erupt. My pulse thundered in my ears as the first fist pounded against the door. The wood rattled under the impact, echoing through the house. Then came Karen's voice, dripping with venom and glee. "Open the door, neighbor. Don't make us break it down." I shut off, the lights plunging the cabin into complete darkness. My heart pounded, my breath shallow. Upstairs, I heard the faint creak of floorboards as Emily moved the kids into the far corner of the bedroom. I raised the bat in one hand, the flashlight in the other, and positioned myself near the hallway. My entire body was tense, every muscle. Ready to spring? If Karen thought she could turn my home into her playground, she was about to learn just how wrong she was, and in that moment, I made a silent vow. No one touches my family. Not tonight. Not ever, asterisk. The pounding on the front door grew louder, each thud reverberating through the cabin like a war drum. My grip on the bat tightened until my knuckles turned white. The flashlight in my other hand felt like both a weapon and a lifeline, a beam of control against the suffocating darkness. Outside, Karen was in her element. I could hear her voice rising over the drunken laughter of her entourage, sharp and commanding like she thought she was the general of some ragtag army. He's weak. He can't stop all of us. This lake belongs to everyone, and this cabin should be open for community gatherings. Tonight, we're claiming it. Her words were followed by cheers and jeers. Bottles clinked together like celebratory toasts. My stomach turned, not from fear, but from fury. She wasn't just trespassing. She was using my home, my family's sanctuary, as a stage to fuel her ego. Upstairs, a faint sound reached me. The muffled sob of my daughter, Sophie, cut through me sharper than any weapon could. Emily whispered something to her, trying to calm her, but I could hear the tremor in her voice too. Fear had seeped into every corner of this house, and Karen was the one pouring it in. My jaw clenched. Enough was enough. I crept toward the side window, crouching low, and peeked out. A few of Karen's followers had already wandered into the yard, some staggering from drink, others carrying boxes of what looked like fireworks. Fireworks, God help me. They weren't just planning to break in. They were planning to destroy. One man shouted, "Come on, Karen, let's light this place up." He lifted a bottle with a rag sticking out of it, a Molotov cocktail if I'd ever seen one. My blood went cold. Karen snapped back at him. "Not yet. We party first, then we show him who's boss. This house will be mine by the end of the night." Word ignited something inside me, a rage so fierce it left no room for hesitation. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about survival. I backed away from the window and whispered to myself, steadying my breath, "Stay calm. Think." I knew the cabin better than anyone. Every hallway, every creaky board, every hiding spot. They might have numbers, but I had the home field advantage. I quickly moved through the downstairs rooms, shutting doors quietly, creating choke points. If they got in, they wouldn't find an open floor plan. They'd find a maze designed to slow them down. I pulled a heavy oak chair against the front door, jamming it under the handle as an extra barricade. Then I killed the last light, a small lamp flickering near the fireplace. The cabin fell into absolute blackness. The music outside blared louder. The bass thumping against the walls. Karen's voice cut through it. "Break a window if you have to. He can't hide forever. We'll flush him out." The sound of glass shattering came from the back, followed by a cheer. My heart jolted. They were making their move. I raised the bat, planted my feet, and felt the adrenaline surge like fire in my veins. I thought of Sophie's tear-streaked face upstairs, of Emily's trembling hands clutching the doorknob, my son clutching his toy truck in fear. No, I wouldn't let these people terrorize them, as if reading my mind. Karen shouted again, her tone dripping with malice. "Don't be scared, neighbor. We're just here to enjoy what's ours. You should have listened when I told you to hand this place over. Now it's too late." Her words stabbed into me like icy daggers. Memories rushed back her standing at the property line last summer, wagging her finger and threatening lawsuits. Her smug smile when she warned me, "You'll regret keeping this cabin for yourself." Well, tonight it looked like she had decided to make good on her threat. I crouched in the hallway, every sense on high alert, listening as footsteps crunched over broken glass. Two shadows slid through the kitchen window, their voices hushed, but slurred with alcohol. The floor creaked. "Under their boots? Man, this place is nice," one of them whispered. Karen wasn't kidding. "Let's raid the fridge before the party starts," the other replied with a chuckle. I felt my pulse spike. I thought this was a game, a party, a takeover. But they were stepping into a storm they weren't prepared for. The first man's outline appeared at the edge of the hallway, his silhouette barely visible in the faint moonlight filtering through the window. My muscles coiled like springs. I whispered under my breath, so low only I could hear, "You picked the wrong house." With that, I steadied my stance, ready for the fight that was about to erupt inside these walls. The invasion had begun. Asterisk. The cabin had never felt smaller. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of movement outside pressed against my chest like a vice. I crouched low in the hallway, the bat heavy in my hands, the flashlight ready to blind anyone who dared. "Come close." The sound of shattered glass echoed again from the kitchen. I heard the thud of boots hitting the hardwood floor, then the low murmur of drunken voices. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out almost everything else. "Yo, this guy's got good whiskey," one of them said, fumbling with the cabinet. "Forget the whiskey man. Karen said we'd take over the whole place. Imagine the view in the morning," the other replied with a laugh. I gritted my teeth. They weren't scared. They weren't even cautious. They thought they owned the place already. The first shadow crossed into the hallway, tall and broad-shouldered, moving like he belonged. I rose from the crouch, swung the bat low, and connected square with his shin. The crack of wood against bone sent him howling, collapsing onto one knee. Before he could recover, I swung again, this time into his side. He toppled to the floor with a grunt, gasping for air. The second intruder rushed forward, cursing, but I clicked the flashlight on and blasted the beam straight into his eyes. He staggered, blinded, arms flailing. I didn't wait. With a shove, I drove him backward into the broken window frame. Glass crunched, and he tumbled outside, screaming as he landed hard in the dirt. Shouts erupted from the porch. More footsteps thundered toward the cabin. "He's inside. Get him." Karen's shrill voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Don't. Stop now. He can't take you all." The man on the floor writhed, clutching his side, groaning. I stepped back, heart racing, and braced for the next wave. The front door shook violently, its the barricade chair groaning under the pressure. The wood creaked and splintered, but held for now. Then the pounding stopped. Silence. A silence more. Terrifying than the noise, I edged closer to the door, bat raised, and pressed my ear against the wood. That's when I heard the faint scrape at the back again. More of them climbing through the window. They were splitting up. I darted toward the kitchen. But the moment I turned the corner, two more shadows poured in. One held a beer bottle raised high, like a weapon. The other carried a metal pipe. "There he is." The man with the bottle lunged. I swung the flashlight, smashing it into his wrist. The bottle flew from his hand and shattered on the floor. Before he could recover, I rammed the bat into his stomach. He doubled over, gagging, and collapsed against the cabinets. The second man swung the pipe at my head. I ducked, feeling the rush of air as it barely missed. My heart leapt into my throat. I jabbed forward, slamming the flashlight into his face, the beam blinding him point blank. He screamed, dropping the pipe, clutching his eyes. I kicked it away and shoved him backward, into the fridge. He slid down, dazed, groaning in pain. Adrenaline coursed through me, but so did dread. For every one I knocked down, there were 10 more outside. The music blasted louder, distorted bass rattling the walls. Shadows shifted across the windows. A dozen figures pressed against the glass, trying to peer inside. The porch creaked under their combined weight. Karen's voice again, dripping with venom. "Don't be cowards. Break every window if you have to. This house belongs to the lake." The pounding resumed, this time from 3 sides at once. Windows rattled, shutters cracked, glass shattered in the guest room. My cabin, my sanctuary, was being torn apart by a mob. I darted back into the hallway, my lungs burning. Upstairs, I heard Sophie crying harder now, Emily murmuring desperately to calm her. My son's small voice cut through. "Daddy, what's happening?" That sound alone nearly broke me. My hands trembled, my throat tightening, but I pushed it down. Couldn't let fear take me. I had to stay sharp. A crash erupted from the living room as another window gave way. 2 more intruders tumbled in, one falling over the coffee table, the other landing hard on the rug. I let out a primal shout and charged. The bat cracked across the first man's shoulder before he even stood up. He yelped, rolling away. Second swung wildly, but I ducked low, driving my shoulder into his gut and slamming him into the wall. The drywall cracked with the impact. They weren't expecting resistance, certainly not from me alone. Each one I struck down seemed shocked, their bravado draining into panic. But the noise was drawing more. I could hear them shouting, rushing. A mob was about to storm in, and I couldn't hold the line forever. I backed toward the stairs, every muscle screaming, every nerve on edge. My body ached from the blows I dealt and dodged, but I refused to yield. The cabin smelled of sweat, alcohol, and broken wood. Shards of glass crunched underfoot. My once peaceful retreat had become a war zone, and still Karen laughed from outside. "You're only one man. We'll tear you down." Her voice was fuel to my fire. I raised the bat high, teeth bared, eyes locked on the next wave of shadows pressing inside. They wanted a fight. Now they had one. Asterisk. The cabin floor was littered with broken glass, overturned chairs, and groaning bodies. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath, bat slick in my sweaty grip. Every inch of me ached, but the adrenaline roaring in my veins kept me moving. I could hear the thundering of boots outside, more voices shouting. More laughter, though it sounded shakier now, uncertain. They'd thought this would be easy. They thought they'd come here, break a few windows, scare my family, drink my whiskey, and claim my cabin like a prize. But the look on the faces of the men I'd already dropped told me the truth was sinking in. I wasn't prey, it was the storm. The front door slammed again, harder this time. The barricade chair screeched across the floor as the wood splintered. Under pressure, my head snapped toward it. Shadows pressed against the window panes, their outlines stretched in the moonlight. "Don't stop now." Karen's shrill voice cut through, though there was a crack in it now. "He's only one man. Don't let him scare you." I barked a bitter laugh. One man, maybe, but one man with a family to protect. That was more than enough. The door finally gave way with a deafening crack, the chair splintering as the handle snapped free. The door slammed open, crashing against the wall. A surge of figures poured inside, half drunk but fueled by mob mentality. I planted my feet, swung the bat hard, and caught the first one square in the chest. He went down gasping, the air knocked out of him. Second lunged, but I angled the flashlight beamed right into his eyes, and while he staggered blind, I drove my knee into his stomach and shoved him backward into his buddy. The narrow hallway worked in my favor. They could only come at me one or two at a time, and every one that fell slowed the others. The third man, burly and red-faced, charged like a bull. I sidestepped at the last second, slammed the bat against his ribs, and shoved him headfirst into the wall. The drywall gave way with a sickening crunch, leaving him slumped and groaning. "Get him," Karen screamed, her voice shriller, more desperate now. But the mob was faltering. The chaos of their drunken courage was evaporating into panic. Every groan, every crash, every cry of pain chipped away at their bravado. They had come for a party, not a war. Another intruder grabbed a beer bottle from the floor, swinging wildly. I ducked, the glass shattering against the wall. I rammed my shoulder into his chest, driving him into the coat closet, and before he could react, I slammed the door shut and twisted the lock. He pounded on it from inside, cursing, but he wasn't going anywhere. A crash behind me made me spin. Another had slipped in through the broken kitchen window, wielding a metal pole. He swung at my head, but I raised the bat and blocked it with a crack of wood against steel. My arms vibrated with the impact. I shoved forward, pushing him off. Balanced, then jammed the flashlight beam in his eyes and smashed the bat against his shoulder. The pole clattered to the ground as he howled, stumbling back through the window he came from. The cabin echoed with chaos shouts, cries, the pounding of fists against walls, but something had changed. I could feel it. Their confidence was cracking, and then, over the noise, I heard the faintest sound. The sobbing upstairs had stopped. My daughter wasn't crying anymore. My son wasn't whimpering. Emily must have told them to listen. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were clinging to her for comfort. But they were quiet now. That silence gave me strength. They were depending on me, and I would not fail them. I turned back toward the doorway, only a handful of Karens so-called. Army remained inside, most of them hesitating, eyeing the bodies of their friends sprawled across the floor. Their drunken smirks had vanished, replaced with wide-eyed uncertainty. "You want this cabin?" I snarled, raising the bat. "Come and take it." Shh. None moved. Outside, Karen shrieked, "Don't stop! He's bluffing. He can't hold out forever." But her words rang hollow. The way her voice cracked told me she was as shaken as they were. The last intruder tried his luck, rushing me with a scream, sidestepped, brought the bat down on his back, and sent him crashing to the ground. He didn't get up. Breathing hard, I shoved the front door closed again, jamming it with what furniture I could drag into place. The house reeked of sweat, beer, and blood. Groaning bodies littered the floor. My arms trembled, but I was still standing, and outside the mob was faltering. Their leader was losing control. Karen's shrill commands were answered not with cheers, but with silence, mutters, and the sound of retreating footsteps. For the first time that night, I realized something important. I wasn't just defending my family anymore. I was breaking their spirit. One fight at a time, I was turning the tables. Asterisk. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the groans of the injured scattered across my living room floor. My chest heaved, sweat dripping into my eyes, but I didn't dare lower the bat. The barricaded door rattled once more, but no one pushed through. The mob outside had lost its fire. Then, faint at first but growing louder, came a sound that made my knees nearly buckle with relief. The wail of sirens, blue and red lights flickered against the trees beyond the yard, washing over the drunken faces outside. The shouts quieted into murmurs. Karen's voice, so loud and commanding minutes before, faltered, "No, don't stop. Can't arrest all of us. This is our right. Keep going." But her words fell flat. I peeked through the shattered window, and what I saw almost made me laugh. Her army of 12 was crumbling, half of them staggering back toward the dirt road, the other half frozen in place like deer caught in headlights. The sirens grew deafening, the gravel crunching under tires. As sheriff's cruisers pulled up, headlights blazed across the yard, illuminating broken bottles, toppled coolers, and wide-eyed trespassers caught mid-crime. Sheriff's Department, hands where we can see them. Floodlights flared, throwing the scene into harsh clarity. Deputies. Spilled out, guns drawn, voices sharp and authoritative. The mob panicked. A few tried to run, but more cruisers screeched in from the other end of the road, cutting off their escape. Karen, ever the queen in her own mind, marched forward with her chin high, pointing at my cabin. "Officers, arrest him! He attacked us!" This is a community property dispute. The deputies didn't even blink. One of them, a tall man with a gray beard, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we got a call from the homeowner's wife," said UNU. "Your friends forced entry, assaulted him, and threatened his family. That true?" Karen's face twisted, her bravado slipping for the first time. That's a lie. He's hoarding the lake. We were reclaiming what's ours." The deputy's expression hardened. "What's yours?" "Ma'am, you broke into a man's house in the middle of the night with 12 people. That's not reclaiming. That's felony burglary." I unlocked the barricaded door and stepped outside, bat still in hand. My arms shook from exhaustion, my shirt stained with sweat and streaked with dirt, but I stood tall. Emily appeared behind me, holding Sophie close, our son clutching her robe. Their faces pale but alive, safe. The sheriff caught my eye, gave me a firm nod, and said, "You did good protecting your family." The moment his words hit me, my knees nearly buckled again, not from weakness this time, but from the sheer release of tension I'd been holding. I had been ready to fight until my body gave out, but finally, the nightmare was ending. Deputies swarmed the yard, cuffing Karen's followers one by one. The groaning men inside the cabin were dragged out, cursing or crying, their bravado gone. 2 ambulances arrived to cart off the worst injuries. Karen herself tried to argue, shrieking, "This isn't over. You can't do this. I own this community." The gray-bearded deputy finally lost patience. "Lady, the only thing you own is a one-way ticket to jail. Turn around." She fought, but they twisted her arms behind her back and clamped on the cuffs. She screamed, kicking at the gravel, until one deputy shoved her into the back of a cruiser and slammed the door shut. Her voice cut off, muffled behind the glass. I stood on the porch, Emily's hand slipping into mine, the kids pressed against us. The flashing lights illuminated everything: my shattered windows, my wrecked furniture, the bottles and trash strewn across the yard. My once quiet retreat was a battlefield scarred by Karen's madness. But as I looked at my family safe, whole, Olivia felt something stronger than anger. Pride. I had stood my ground. I had fought for them when it mattered most. The sheriff came over once more, resting a hand on my shoulder. We'll handle the charges. Burglary, assault, trespassing. She won't be walking away from this one. You and your family should. Stay with a relative tonight while we get this place cleaned up. I nodded, exhaustion weighing me down like a lead blanket.
Thank you.
He gave me a firm pat and walked away, barking orders to his deputies, as the cruisers pulled off one by one. Their taillights fading into the distance, the night returned to stillness. The only sound was the soft lapping of the lake against the shore. I looked out at it, that glassy expanse under the moonlight, and clenched my jaw. This lake was mine. This cabin was mine. No matter what Karen had believed, no mob, no self-proclaimed queen, no drunk horde could take it away from me, because when it came down to it, this wasn't just a house, it was home, and I had proved beyond any doubt that I would fight for it with everything I had. Asterisk,